Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Hingham Zoning Board of Appeals. It is March 26, 2018. The time is 7:07 p.m. On our agenda this evening is Riverstone LLC. Its request for a comprehensive permit under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, to construct a 36-unit condominium development, including 9 affordable units on approximately 6.7 acres of land located off Ward Street, which is map 124, lots 70 to 75 and 26, in Residence District B. The revised site plan dated March 9th, 2018 depicts 32 units, and this hearing is a continuation from our prior hearing on February 27th, 2018. I applaud you all for getting parking. It's just crazy out there. Who's here for the applicant? And if you wanted to come up, please.
My name is Warren Baker. I represent the applicant. With me is Brad McKenzie, the project engineer, and Brian Murphy, the principal.
I understand you were away for a trip. Hope it went well.
I was. Thank you. It was great.
Okay. As is our custom, before I proceed, I should mention that these proceedings are being recorded by the zoning office as well as by HCAM. As is our custom at these hearings, we start off by asking the zoning administrator what items, what documents and reports have been received by the zoning office. So Emily, please.
So since the last hearing, which was held on February 27th.
Can everyone hear Emily?
Sorry. Any better? No? Hello? Yeah? Okay. So the last hearing was held on February 27th of this year. Since then, from the applicant, we've received the following materials. Revised plan set prepared by McKenzie Engineering Group with the latest revision date of March 9th, 2018, consisting of 17 sheets. With that, we received a response to engineering plan review prepared by Susan Spratt, PE and project manager, as well as Brad McKenzie, PE and president of McKenzie Engineering Group, also dated March 9th, 2018, and a preliminary hydrologic analysis prepared again by MEG, or McKenzie Engineering Group, with the latest revision date of March 9th, 2018. These materials were received electronically after the close of business on March 9th and in hard copy in the office on March 14th. Materials submitted by representatives of either the board or the town include correspondence dated March 6, 2018 from the Board of Health regarding Riverstone, Hingham, Mass, or Viking Lane. Correspondence dated March 19, 2018 from Chris DiNapoli, Fire Marshal, regarding comments and drawings dated March 9, 2018 for Riverstone, as well as a memorandum dated March 22nd from Emily Wentworth, zoning administrator, regarding review of peer review fund submittal requirement for March 26, 2018 ZBA meeting. Appended to the memo is an exhibit that includes an email inquiry related to peer review funds from the applicant and responses from staff. Materials submitted by abutters and members of the public include comments from Graham Madison, these were actually dated prior to the last hearing. They're dated February 20th. They were also received prior to the last hearing, but inadvertently omitted from the list of materials read into the record that night. We received an email from Ellie Hickey, 5 Autumn Circle, dated February 28, 2018, forwarding an article from John Penny entitled Hingham Permit Hearing Continued for Riverstone 40B Project, which appeared on the WATD blog. An email from Lisa and Brad Taylor of 16 Autumn Circle, dated March 11, 2018, with the subject line, The Matter of Water Migration. Email from Joyce Bethany, 23 Autumn Circle, dated March 19, 2018, with subject line, driveway at 23 Autumn Circle, Hingham, Mass., excuse me. An email from, also from Joyce Bethany, same date, March 19, 2018, with the subject line, benefits of 40B to the town other than affordable housing. Email from Graham Madison, 12 Autumn Circle, dated March 21st, 2018, with the same subject line as an earlier one from Lisa and Brad Taylor, the matter of water migration. An email from Ellie Hickey, 5 Autumn Circle, dated March 22nd, 2018, forwarding an article by Mary Ellen Dever entitled Hingham Health Board Airs Concerns About Riverstone Project, which appeared in the Hingham Journal on March 22nd, 2018. And comments from Lisa and Brad Taylor, 16 Autumn Circle, dated March 24, 2018, regarding roundabout safety concerns.
Thank you. Now, I know that we've had outstanding document requests, requests for reports, requests for information, not all of which we've received. So I'm hoping that you can review for the board what items you expected to receive but are still missing.
Sure. So February 6th, you may recall, the board enumerated a number of concerns they had with the proposed plans and other materials. We did receive various responses to those. Some are addressed in plan revisions. For instance, the sidewalk was increased from 4 feet in width to 5 feet in width. Others, we received responses from the applicant's attorney prior to the last hearing. The board had indicated that those responses may not be adequate. For instance, the response, we do not intend to provide a photometric plan, or we do not intend to increase buffers to wetlands or adjoining properties. But even in those responses, there were commitments to provide additional materials that we have not yet received. These include a cut and fill analysis, hydrant flow tests, and confirmation that there's availability of potable water from Aquarian, as well as documentation related to the load-bearing capacity of the soil absorption system underneath Road B. So those are commitments that the applicant made in their various responses that the board has not yet seen. We also expected to see a supplement to or revised traffic report that would explain the expected impacts of the revised plans in terms of traffic safety, volumes, and circulation resulting from revisions that are shown on the March 9th submittal. Additionally, the board...
So, I'm sorry, stop. So those have not been received?
No, we received a response to prior engineering peer review comments on earlier versions of the plan, but no narrative that would explain why various changes that are depicted on the plans were made, or what those impacts would be. We did not receive a narrative response to outstanding peer review comments raised by the board's wetland scientist, nor did we receive narrative responses to comments from town boards or departments, including specifically the Board of Health or the Fire Prevention Officer. And we still have not received a complete and specific waiver list. Most notably, the most recent waiver list dated February 12th, received February 13th, is missing the level of specificity from local Board of Health and local conservation regulations that the zoning relief provides. So for instance, if the local Board of Health supplementary rules prohibit a soil absorption system within 200 feet, being located greater than 200 feet from a residence, you've asked for relief from that, but not provided to what degree the proposed plan would differ from that requirement. The revised submittal also makes some of the previously submitted waiver requests from zoning regulations inaccurate. So for instance, there was a side yard setback. You previously requested relief to be 15 feet from a property line where 20 feet is required. The proposed plan goes closer to the property line so that 10 feet is now shown where 20 feet is required. And we've heard various commitments from Attorney Baker that that list would be updated as necessary, and we have not received the updated list, particularly in reference to a structural wall where relief has never been requested. That's the list.
Okay, thank you. And then in addition to documents, there's also the funding for the additional peer review work, which, as I understand it, was not received within the time that the board had voted upon at the last meeting after consultation and discussion with the applicant. Can you just review for us where we are in terms of when funds were received and the status of those monies?
The board had voted to require that peer review funds be received by March 9th. They were not received prior to the close of business on that day. They were finally delivered in hand by the applicant on March 14th. However, since they missed the deadline, I was not authorized to authorize our peer review engineers to proceed with their work.
Okay. So I'm thinking we should probably address that issue first, because I know at the last meeting we had, I think you and I had a fair amount of discussion about the timing and when reports and when funds would be received. And initially there was an earlier date that was on the table, and then we talked about, could you really meet that, and let's not create problems. And so we agreed at that point to push things out to a safer date. And unfortunately, still that safer date proved not to be as safe as we expected. The issue for the zoning administrator, for Emily, is that we had a board vote that set the timing, and under the local rules, she was not authorized to waive the time as set in the board vote. So this board needs to consider how to handle that, and I'm wondering perhaps if you have a suggestion.
The first, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. The first issue is that there is no doubt that in that conversation on the 27th, we had picked the time for the submittals. We missed them. For that, we apologize. The issue with regard to the plans, we had submitted them on the 9th in electronic form, but the hard copies were not delivered, I think, until Monday or whatever it was, Monday. So they just couldn't, in the time to do that, get it, but we did get the electronic plans submitted. With regard to the payment, it was 1 o'clock on Friday. I know that my client had responded that he was not able to be here by that 1 o'clock time, and indicated that he would bring the funds back on Monday. As you said, because she had a board vote, I understand that the response was, I cannot accept it. So tendered but not accepted. I understand that the money was finally taken, but under reservation on Wednesday, Tuesday being the snowstorm.
Right.
These things sometimes happen in the complex. As a matter of fact, it happens to all of us. I think on the 27th, I had indicated we wanted to take a look at the bills for the peer review,
right.
and that, of course, we did not yet by that time. Not that there was necessarily a deadline, but we did not get it till that Wednesday after that time. So I think we all suffer some.
Just commenting on that, I believe the bills were available here, and someone coming in to drop off a check actually could pick them up. So
no doubt, and I'm not arguing the point. I'm
Okay.
just saying that request was made, answer was, I'll send it, and it wasn't. But my only point is that, yes, you're right. In a long hearing like this, sometimes those things occur. It was not done maliciously. It was not done to delay the board at all. We understand that, extend the time to make sure it is totally appropriate in these circumstances. It was our error. We tried. We failed.
Thank you. So I think under the regs, the three of us need to have a discussion about how to proceed. The state regs provide that under the state regs, it says that the local board, namely us, that we may provide that if the applicant fails to pay the review fee within the stated time period, the board may deny the comprehensive permit. And our regulations provide that the failure of the applicant to make the initial deposit and to maintain the account in accordance with this section shall be grounds in the board's discretion for denial of the comprehensive permit or continuance of the public hearing until such deposit and/or additional deposit is made and the professional review is completed.
So those are our two options,
Those are
to deny or to continue and extend.
correct.
Okay.
And in my view, I would not want to put the board in a position where if we would go through onto a denial, that we would lose the ability to provide local input in terms of the conditions associated with this application. And at the same time, we've been subject to a delay. I understand you're willing to extend the time. Is that correct? Basically, to make up for that. It would seem that if we proceed, we should proceed reserving our rights to deny if, in fact, we determine that there's been a failure to meet the regulatory requirements of the regulations. So if we proceed, we would do that with a reservation of rights. Thoughts, either one of you?
I agree. I mean, we've gone this far. I think we should try to finish.
I mean, there's a lot that I think it's important to get on the record in terms of what the Board of Health has done, basically, it's not just the Board of Health, it's the Conservation Commission. All the boards have been very supportive in terms of making sure we get the input, and I want to make sure that that input is properly received, analyzed, and ultimately results in a thoughtful decision.
I agree. I, too, do not want to cede local control, and I see that as a potential outcome if we were to vote to deny this permit tonight. The applicant would be well within their rights to appeal, and they would appeal to the state, and I just don't have any confidence that the state can represent the local interest as well as this board can. So I would not be in favor of voting to deny the permit this evening. So.
Agreed.
Is that better? Really?
Quick question.
Well,
I
I'm sorry,
I
we're
can
not,
hear-
I understand that we're not taking comments from the board. Okay, so we will speak up.
It's funny because I can hear it coming through the speakers. I don't know what the problem is.
Okay.
So I just have to eat the microphone, I guess. So, sorry about that.
So am I correct that basically we've lost 2 weeks in terms of the timing? And am I correct that the applicant's willing to now extend an additional 2 weeks onto the timing for this?
Correct.
Pass this around to Attorney Baker.
The torn copy.
Well, got stuck under the
The
mic.
signature's on it, too.
So is this the timing?
Represents the 2-week.
This is a 2-week? Okay.
Okay.
I apologize for the tear. So at this point, I would accept the motion that the board, in its discretion, continue the hearing, reserving the board's rights to deny based on a failure to meet the regulatory requirements, including deadlines.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Joe, would you just state for the record what the new dates are going to be?
So the due dates is that the continued public hearing, which would be the next public hearing, would be April 9th. The public hearing extension deadline date would be June 13th, and the deadline to render a decision would be July 23rd, and the deadline to file that decision would be August 6th.
Joe, can I just ask that you just take a second vote of the board just to affirm those specific dates, because the other board members didn't have the dates in front of them
Okay, so why
during
don't
the
you
first
pass that
vote.
back?
Thank you.
Just to make sure. Just wrote them down. I know Joe Freeman looked at it. But
wrote them down.
So the vote would be the extensions, as just identified, which would be the next hearing date would be April 9th. The public hearing extension deadline would be June 13th, which would be the last day of public hearings. The deadline to render decision, this is under the regulations, would be July 23rd, and the filing deadline for that decision would be August 6th. And we would be exercising our rights to extend the hearings, reserving the board's rights to deny based on a failure of the applicant to meet regulatory requirements, including deadlines contained in those regulations. So I will take a second vote. First, is that the motion, Mr. Friedman?
So moved, Mr. Fisher.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So at this point, I mean, there are a number of key issues that need to be addressed. I think there's a strong public demand to hear from the Board of Health and to get that information into the public record. Before doing that, typically we allow the applicant to make a presentation of its new plans or whatever submissions it wants, and then we return it over. I just want to make sure, are you available for any people from the Board of Health are not running off? Okay, good. So, Mr. Baker, are there items that you would like to present to the board at this point?
Do I understand that you are, I understand that you're intending to have the Board of Health present its comments from the-
Yes.
from the letter that was recently received?
Yes.
And, I'm sorry.
Would you like us to present first, or?
Well, if you had, I mean, I know you've made additional submissions in terms of new plans and revisions. None of that have been reviewed with us by you.
I'm trying to find the most efficient way to do
Sure.
that for you, because I think that particularly with the peer review and the changes that we made,
Right.
it might be wiser to do it in a coherent and common meeting.
Okay.
So I think we have no objection to, outside of the fact that plans were in fact submitted, you'll see that there's a change in the entrance, et cetera. But if that's fact, we would be happy to hear the Board of Health. And
Though I think the members of the public would benefit from hearing just a general summary of the changes in the plans.
can you?
Sure.
Thank you.
For the record, Brad McKenzie, McKenzie Engineering Group, 150 Longwater Drive in Norwell. I'm under a tight time constraint. I need to leave in about 10 minutes, so I'd be happy to summarize the design revisions.
Can you hear him back there? Yes. Anybody hear him?
Yeah. Sounds like you got to move back there because they can hear it better back there. I don't know.
Take your vote in hands.
As Emily read into the record, we submitted a letter on March 9th that really was in response to a review conducted by Amory Engineering dated February 6th. And we also addressed some comments from from Vanas dated February 6th as well. The major design change was a reconfiguration in the access of the project from this location here, which is the existing Viking Lane right-of-way, about 650 feet this direction to this location. And it was really driven by a study that was conducted by Sergeant David Hort of the police department. It was a speed study that he conducted that was done subsequent to the study that was conducted by our traffic engineer, which indicated that the 85th percentile speeds were actually much higher than what our expert observed. The sergeant observed speeds as high as 39 miles an hour in both directions, I believe on a weekend in January, whereas our consultant observed them to be much lower, 32 to 34 miles an hour. So in accordance with the AASHTO regulations, the federal regulations that dictate what the safe intersection site distances would be, for a speed of 39 miles an hour, the required intersection site distance is 290 feet. We could not achieve the 290-foot distance in both directions at the Viking Lane entrance, and we felt that although in the current condition we could achieve that, we could not achieve that without that triangle encroaching within private properties on both sides of the proposed intersection. So at the time we kind of regrouped as a team. We thought the prudent thing to do would be to relocate the entrance so that we could provide that site triangle entirely within the property under control by the applicant. And there's a site distance triangle plan that's was provided as part of the resubmission. So in connection with that design change, a fairly major design change, we also, obviously, it resulted in a redesign of the grades and the stormwater management system. There was the flow of the circulation now is obviously in this direction through Autumn Circle. There was some traffic calming measures proposed at the intersection speed table that was relocated to this location here. Our traffic engineer recommended that we provide some traffic calming at the cul-de-sac at Autumn Circle. So there's a roundabout proposed here with appropriate signage and striping that meets state and federal regulations. As Emily read into the record, we did agree to widen the sidewalk to 5 feet all the way down to Ward Street. We eliminated, there was a 2-foot grass strip that was proposed with some Cape Cod berm. We decided that we'd rather have a 5-foot sidewalk with a sloped granite edge instead with no grass strip. Some other changes that were accomplished, you mentioned, there was some regrading. There was a concern that Amory had about the stormwater runoff in this area here. It was pitching away from our property towards Autumn Circle. This was regraded. The roadway profiles were redesigned to ensure that the water run from Autumn Circle back to the applicant's property and be conveyed through a drainage system eventually to the stormwater detention area that's proposed to be enlarged behind the series of units here. You read into the record a memo or a review from John Zimmer of South River Environmental that the board retained. Mr. Zimmer actually confirmed that the delineation of the bordering vegetated wetland as done by Brad Holmes of ECR was accurate in this location here. He did find that there was a bordering vegetated wetland in this location to the south of Ward Street, just outside of the right-of-way, we believe, on private property, and the 100-foot buffer zone to that wetland would extend onto this portion of the property here, making it subject to Conservation Commission review. We are aware that we did submit as stated in our March 9th letter, we did submit an application or a request to Aquarian for a will serve letter. We're waiting on that. And we're in the process of scheduling hydrant flow tests with Aquarian. They did not. We reached out to them in mid-February, and it's not their policy to perform hydrant flow tests until March 1st. So obviously the weather hasn't been quite cooperative in that regard lately. I think with that, an auto turn analysis, a revised auto turn analysis that analyzes the turning movements for the SU vehicle as well as the Hingham Tower truck, and shows that none of the overhangs will encroach outside of the paved limit. And that pretty much is a brief summary of the changes that were made to the plans, and we understand that we'll be awaiting another peer review from Amory on the hydrologic analysis and the plan set.
One of the items you talked about.
Traffic.
I'm sorry.
The traffic, Vanessa's the traffic people got to talk to one another about the changes too, right?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
There was some environmental work that detected a potential vernal pool. Have you looked into that further?
I have not looked into it. I think perhaps we'll ask the applicant's environmental engineer to look into it, but we haven't engaged him yet.
Okay. Do you have anything, I know he's going to run, Emily, that you'd like to? Well, I appreciate your staying a little bit longer than you initially planned.
No, thanks. I appreciate the board's consideration.
Okay, so next I would like to focus on issues raised by the Board of Health, and I understand we've got representatives of the Board of Health here. So if you'd like to come forward, please come up to the mic.
My name is Kirk Schultz, and I'm a member of the Hingham Board of Health. With me, we have our Executive Health Officer, Ms. Susan Sarney, and we're here to answer any questions that the board may have for us, including any questions that the applicant would have relative to the extensive report that we wrote. I think it was March 6th or March 8th dated, which we haven't had any correspondence with the applicant regarding any communication relative to that. We thought that the report that we wrote was quite detailed and brought significant and alarming concerns relative to this particular project. So I'll answer any questions you have.
Did you have an executive summary so that everyone out here can appreciate the work you've done? Because it really is extensive and detailed, and we really appreciate it.
The town of Hingham is served by a single sole aquifer, in which is located within the Weir River subbasin. And I think most people in Hingham are familiar with that. That particular portion of the Weir River is protected, and as it is in most communities that get their water supply from within the town. And so this particular property is located outside of that particular area of the Weir River. It's very close. It's 700 feet away, but it's located outside. And as we know, if a property is within Zone 2, which is the area in which the production wells have for 180 days worth of pumping in the worst case scenario in the summertime, there are strong restrictions within those areas relative to septic systems and nitrogen loadings specifically. What's unique about nitrogen is that you can't filter nitrogen out of the soil and out of the groundwater specifically. It's a more elaborate process. And so we have this protection within 2/3, if not a larger area within Hingham, within our Zone 2, protecting Aquarion's well water supply, and again, the Weir River watershed in general, which also has a degree of protection, not as strong as a Zone 2, but it does have protection that the Board of Health implemented back in 1996. Because we are a stress watershed, we have low flow conditions during the summer, and so we have that delineation. I think everyone is familiar with that. That's not in question here. So then we look at this particular property. What is unique about this area in this section of town, which is located outside of the Zone 2 and the Aquarian wells? Well, number one, Aquarian has been required by the state to find additional water supply for the town because we have reached the maximum withdrawal registration amount that the state allows within the Weir River. And so, currently we receive a lot of water from Cohasset relative to Linden Ponds. And so we've actually gone over our withdrawal, but we've done it through some interesting accounting, and so we receive water currently from Cohasset. There's been talk of receiving water from the MWRA and from areas that are outside of the Weir River watershed subbasin, and that's where we're looking at currently. That's where Aquarian is currently looking at for additional water supply. So back in November or December, Aquarian drilled test wells over in the south area of Hingham by the industrial park. Because within Hingham, outside of the Weir River, which is Weir River's watershed subbasin, which is water-rich underground, there are only two other areas within Hingham that the state has identified that there is adequate underground water for the production wells for a municipal water system. One is in that South Hingham area that I talked about over in the industrial park, very small area, and the other one happens to be right across the street from this particular property. And so when you look at the area within this side of Ward Street, the state has designated it as a potential production area. I forget the exact language. Susan can probably help me out with that in a minute, for water supply. Now in Hingham, we don't own our water supply system. That is Aquarian. And so we may go and declare things and move a little quicker than Aquarian does, but we are subject to the private water supplier. And so they've done testing in the southern part of the town within the industrial park, but they haven't done testing in this area. But from my understanding through talking to Aquarian, and I happen to be a member of the Water Supply Committee, in addition to the Board of Health, that this is an area they're going to be looking at, again, for a supplemental water source outside of the Weir River watershed subbasin, but within their catchment area within Hingham. And this particular area is water-rich. And as I mentioned in the letter, for those who have seen it, a good third of this water is located under Weymouth. But Weymouth doesn't have access to it because their housing is so tight, they can't provide a Zone 1 area in Weymouth to access this. So this is water that potentially Hingham would be able to use to supplement our water supply. Aquarian is currently looking at it, and the state identifies that if there is an area of a potential water supply source, that would be considered a nitrogen-sensitive area.
Can I ask you to discuss whether or not this area is dependent on private wells?
Yeah, and so that's the first issue that I want to talk about. That's the public municipal supply. The second would be, do we have areas outside of Zone 2 in which we have a large number or a significant number of private wells? And we identified about 6 or 7 regions within town, roadways, and of all of those, the Ward Street area showed the greatest number of private wells. And in particular, the neighboring property and abutting property to this particular site has a private well water supply. So the board deems this area an area of nitrogen concern, and again, it has a Title 5 name to it that Susan's going to help. A transient water supply, but it's a nitrogen-sensitive area because of this conglomeration of private wells within the area, and we've identified, I believe, 11 within a small circle that is around this property. And we never really looked at this area before as a nitrogen-sensitive area and come before you and say, hey, we have this, that, and the other thing within Hingham as far as areas that are nitrogen-sensitive for private water supplies, because the town has actually been protected by the board's regulations on bedroom size. We have a regulation which is above and beyond the state regulation of 10,000 square foot per bedroom as far as the limit, 10,000 square foot per acre that you need per bedroom. And so we happen to have a higher standard, 20%, which is 12,500, within the entirety of Hingham, covering every area, including this. And the reason that was done back in 1996 was to protect these areas that are outside of the Weir River for potential production wells, in addition to what we're seeing here, because we actually don't know all of the wells that are in Hingham. We put out a call in the newspaper maybe about 8 or 10 years ago when we went through the permitting of these wells. And some people didn't respond, but we do know that we have at least 11 wells within this area. So we, again, deem it a nitrogen-sensitive area. And once that is done, now we go into the state regulation that has very definitive requirements for nitrogen-sensitive regions, similar to the Zone 2 that I talked about earlier with the Aquarian well. And so what we're asking the Zoning Board of Appeals to do is to impose those standards that already exist within Title 5 regulation relative to a nitrogen-sensitive area for this region of Ward Street that has this cluster of 11 private wells, including the property next door.
Just so I'm clear, you're talking about having us impose the state Title V regulations, not something that's stricter in Hingham.
And yes, I understand the zoning board can waive a local requirement. You can accept a local requirement, or you can amend a local requirement. And we're asking that you amend the local requirement of 12,500 square foot per bedroom to 10,000, which is the state requirement. We don't want to impose any restriction above what the state requirement is, because that's what the law says as far as this particular application. One other thing. There's two aspects of the state Title V that's important. They have the standard, 10,000 square foot of land on the property needed per bedroom. That's your standard. That is your standard relative to the geography. But Title V also has this nitrogen loading standard based on what they're building on that particular site. And so we can have the 10,000 requirement, and they can build something that has a whole lot of grass and a whole lot of impervious area that's going to raise the nitrogen on their property. And so even though you have a 10,000 square foot protection, you still have incredibly high nitrogen loads. Or you could have on the other side where they do no grass and they have a minimal area of impervious surfaces, and that could be a lower or more economically, ecologically favorable property. So Title V covers that. It says in addition to this requirement of, and a hard fast requirement of 10,000 square foot per acre, we're also going to have you put in treatment. Advanced, innovative, denitrification treatment. And that treatment process, you can select whatever you want. There are variations in that. And that's where the applicant has to go through the process of doing a nitrogen load study based on what they're submitting, and they'll match the treatment that they're required to provide within this site, because nitrogen sensitive, relative to what they're building. And so there's two things that we're asking the zoning board to look at. The hard, fast, the easy one, the state standard of 10,000 square foot per bedroom, and second, treatment. Now, our town standard is treatment at 7,500. The state standard for nitrogen loading is 2,000. And so we're going to look for the 2,000, 2,000 gallons per day of effluent. The other one was 7,500 gallons per day of effluent. So the town standard is actually lower than the state standard relative to treatment plant. We're going to be looking for the 2,000, but we still would like the Zoning Board of Appeals to apply that particular local standard because it is so important and so significant an issue relative to this particular application. And we really haven't heard the applicant address this issue of nitrogen in any of their communications or any correspondence. So the Board of Health is concerned that this may not be something that is fully appreciated. And so, yeah.
What are the health implications here if there's a problem?
Yeah. Nitrogen within the groundwater is a pollutant that doesn't really have a strong effect on adults, but it can have devastating effect on children. If you're making your baby formula or having them just drink water, young children, the nitrogen can build up and it's a neurotoxin. And so it can cause blue baby syndrome, if you ever heard of that particular condition, and including even death. And so this is a serious, significant problem, as why the state has not one, but two policies on nitrogen loading within the within their structure that accompany the regulations to deal with this serious health concern.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions. Well, I guess one. We know the applicant has stated the total number of bedrooms here is, and as you, sorry, I have to remember to eat the microphone. We're looking at 90 bedrooms here. And as you know, that's just a shade under the DEP groundwater discharge permit threshold. If there was an additional bedroom or they were to exceed that 10,000 gallons per day, what additional requirements, if any, might apply to this treatment plant?
They would have to go to a discharge permit from the state. If they get over 10,000 gallons of effluent per day, you know, they're at 9,900. You know, the maximum you can legitimately.
Those of us who have been doing this for a while remember when the DEP permit threshold was 15,000 gallons a day, and the magic number of bedrooms was 136. So, but yeah, so it's down to 10,000. So
we did two things with our report, and I'll sit down. We identified the number of bedrooms that we would expect to see when you bring nitrogen into the equation. And so we have a range, and you saw it from 29 to 26. It's actually a disagreement I have with my executive health officer. The 26 is Title V. That calls a acre 40,000 square feet, buildable acre. My executive health officer, she likes to use the 43,000 number in her calculation for nitrogen loading. That's why we have a range. You know, if it was my letter exclusively, you'd probably see the 26, hers you'd see the 29. But we would go with the 29, obviously. So that would be the highest number of bedrooms that we would see imposing the state standard. Now, that's if their treatment can allow them to get there. And base, you know, let's say they have 32 structures right now on site. And they put one bedroom or around one bedroom in every structure, and they have one for an athletic club, and they have one for a kitchen. And so of the 32, 29 have one bedroom, and the 3 are for other issues. So they have the same impervious area, the same lawn area. And so when you look at that, the amount of nitrogen protection that's required based on what they have, and again, they have no nitrogen protection, it's going to bring that number down to just 8 bedrooms for a conventional septic system. So it is absolutely required that we have the two things, the state standard of 10,000, and they have to do treatment that, that'll bring them up, and they should be able to get up to that 29 bedrooms by using treatment. There are forms that are out there, but that's up to them to decide what they want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily, anything?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Are there any other town officials here who have public comments or questions they would like to present?
I was just going to comment.
You can come up to the mic, please. Make sure you identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Susan, the Executive Health Officer for the town of Hingham. I'm just going to go over a little bit of the numbers in terms of nitrogen loading. Kirk described it well with the 26 to 29 bedrooms using the Title V 10,000 square feet per bedroom. So if you take your 6.6 acres and divide it by 10,000, that gives us a range of 26 to 29 bedrooms. We supplied a nitrogen loading calculation in that letter using all your green areas, your pervious, your impervious, your roof areas. And with those numbers, we calculated the nitrogen loading to be 15.64 at the property line. So DEP talks about, in a letter from 1999, they talked about nutrient-sensitive areas. And an area dependent on private wells fits that definition. So there's roughly 12 potable wells that the dwellings rely on for their water source. DEP goes on to say that the nitrogen level for an area that depends on public water, aquarium water, should be 10 milligrams per liter. In an area with potable wells, the state likes to see 5 milligrams per liter. And the calculation at the property line of this project was 15.64. So doing a little math, if we use the state 10,000 square feet per bedroom, the calculation, like Kirk said, was 26 to 29 bedrooms. Using the nitrogen loading, bring it down to 26, or range 28 bedrooms, it brings the nitrogen level down to roughly, 8.36. Now, if you apply treatment using a range, treatment can reduce nitrogen between 50 to 70%. Say we use 60%. Because this area is dependent on potable wells, the state says 5 milligrams per liter at the property line. Taking that 8.36, reducing it by 60%, you would get a nitrogen loading calculation of 3.34, well under the 5, which is an area dependent on potable wells.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other town officials here who have comments or questions? No. So, Emily, before we turn this over to general public comments, do you have any items you want to make sure we cover?
I don't have anything additional.
Okay. So at this point, any members of the public who have comments or questions, please raise your hand. I'll recognize you and then come up to the mic. And again, as before, this is not going to be the last time that you'll have the opportunity to speak. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Bob Mullen. I'm Bob Mullen, 18 Autumn Circle. And yesterday was the first time I saw the little island in front of my house there. It might change the area, as far as getting in and out of my driveway, things like that. But just I'm not a lawyer, but an easement is usually for the public good, I thought. What good is Autumn Circle getting out of anything they're doing right here? All the good seems to be going in that direction. Everybody here pays taxes. Everybody here has been on that circle for 30 years. I just don't find mentally why would be helping them. It's,
I got it.
and the other quick thing is, I haven't been to too many of the meetings with work. Over the last couple of years, you've given them more and more deadlines. Okay, move it to this date. Nah, we can't give you the check. We don't have any money. We'll see you next week. I do business with the government. If you miss your deadline, putting your bid in, putting any paperwork in, your bid's over. You can't go back and say, well, I was in town, I was out of town, checkbook's empty. It's over. Is there any point in time where we don't have to repeat? Come back next week, come back next month, 6 months. Is it 6 months from now where you say, if you don't finish what you told us you were going to do, go back to square one. Let's start all over. New plans for the state, new applications, everything. Why are they wasting your time on the same problems for the last 2 years? And no answers. They come out with the nitrogen. I saw the letter. No answers. You're talking about little babies getting sick, little kids. Not my problem. I don't live in that town. I live in another town. What about the fire truck? Not my problem. At some point, everybody in this street, on the street, everybody in the town is affected by this. People driving in and out of there. If I remember last year, they said, well, 90 cars going up and down that street. Okay, 90 cars going through in front of my street. I'll have a little toll booth set up. It'll be great for me. But how is that possibly going to not affect people? 90 cars in front of your house. And again, that's the first time I saw that little circle. I thought, what's going up there next to McDonald's in front of that circle?
They will.
I don't know. You look at me like, oh,
Okay.
you're going to beat me up or something.
Well,
all I'm saying is, I live there, and you're putting a circle in front of my house.
So it's not up to them to put either a McDonald's or a circle.
I hope not. I like Wendy's.
Yeah, okay.
And let the record show that the parking requirements for McDonald's are too tough to meet in this town, okay? So I wouldn't worry about a McDonald's.
But one of the reasons that we're making sure all the comments are in and all the reports are done is that local input is critical to make sure that the project is properly constrained so that the adverse impacts that you're concerned about are addressed. So I appreciate you raising the point, and it's not missed on us at all.
I saw that at the beginning when you said you didn't want to just shut it off. And I'm saying, why not just shut it off? And then you said, well, if we shut it off, then everybody can't put their input in. If you keep it open, we can continue to give input as far as the water, the nitrogen, the traffic, whatever. That I didn't know. Thank you for that. But
Thank you.
just a quick comment. There's a lot of people here who pay a lot of money and who love the town. I'm assuming everybody knows what would happen if that goes in the way it is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Ma'am, and then someone in the back there.
Maureen Lynch, 10 Autumn Circle. I just have a question with this new plan. Am I understanding that Viking Lane is no longer going to be accessing this property? Is that correct, or is there now going to be 3 ways in?
Viking Lane is not to be used for accessing the property.
It will not be?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Brad Taylor, 16 Autumn Circle. A couple questions on the new drawing here. Every drawing seems to forget about my house, which is right next to the Mullins. They conveniently, it looks like, have my septic system up there, but not the house. I would be somehow, I guess, backing out of my driveway into the circle, which they say the drawings were done to state. We haven't seen any drawings on this. You know, I did a quick search online to see, and there's certain number of feet you need those dividers, so there's reflection point, deflection points, whatever they call them. There's certain size of the roundabouts that need to be. That's not a big cul-de-sac. I don't know how they're going to do that there.
Well, excuse me.
Well, regardless. Additionally, conveniently, there's another house on the other side of the circle whose driveway they'd have to come out of their house and cross over that divider thing. Conveniently, we can't see that one either. So I don't understand how this is all happening, especially when their own engineer said today the flow will go up Viking Lane and on the Autumn Circle. both of my kids have severe peanut and tree nut allergy. At one point, my oldest went into anaphylactic shock. How are they going to have an ambulance stop out front of my house if that happens? So it's not just nitrogen, it's public safety and everything else.
Exactly right. Yep.
So I just wanted to put that up there that, you know, there's other things there that they're not showing.
Yep, we know that. Right. So, yes, sir.
Ed Johnson, 108 Watt Street. I live a little bit further down on Watt Street, and most people on Watt Street back out of their driveways. And that land, the street is on a curve, it's not flat.
Right.
And when I come out of my driveway, I can't see the White House where the road is going. And I like to see the traffic expert that says 32 to 34 miles. It's 40 to 50 miles there. And walking on that sidewalk, you take your life in hand. Because now in today's world, people are texting, they're on the phone. I'm surprised nobody's been hitting the sidewalk with cars jumping. And when I do get out of my driveway, sometimes I see nobody coming, and all of a sudden somebody's right on my tail. And that's it. I've been in town since 1977, and it's getting worse every year. It's a cut through where people going to Cohasset to Hull, coming up Route 3. And I think that's very dangerous, having that street right there. There's going to be accidents here. You know it's going to happen. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is Ian Ford, 29 Stanford Drive is my address. And I wanted to get back to the situation where we were talking about our water supply, and it sounds like we can't even supply ourselves with enough water. We're doing some kind of accounting situation with Cohasset, and they're trying to help us out. Is that correct?
There's, as part of the Linden Ponds project, there were arrangements to make sure we had sufficient water for that project.
Okay, so so it sounds like at the moment, the present time, we really don't have a surplus. Is that correct?
I can't tell you if that's correct.
So I get, my real question is, why would we risk a water-rich environment at the present time with a development that could destroy this source of our last bullet, if you will? It makes no sense to me at all why one person or two people can financially benefit substantially and let us take the bag. What are we going to do if we don't have any water to drink? If nitrogen loading, it is a big situation, and this developer doesn't even have the courtesy to try to address the issue, and it's a major one. It blows my mind how this can occur. Why should he or anybody else be able to become very wealthy on our dime? I mean, maybe he has to put $4 or $5, $6 million up in escrow to make sure that our water source doesn't get destroyed. But it seems like this would benefit him 100% or her, and we're left holding the bag. What are we going to do if we don't have water to drink, and we have more and more kids with learning disabilities? One of my children has a peanut allergy. I just don't understand it. Why would we risk that? Where is the town's benefit? Where's everyone's benefit? I see one person's benefit, but I don't see any other benefit that the town residents are getting. Thank you.
Good evening, Tom Patch. I'm living down in Ship Street. I'm out of your neighborhood, and so I kind of apologize for coming and speaking. But I do want people to know that people in town are concerned about what's going on up there. And particularly to pick up on Kirk's point, my understanding of this project, the bugaboo with this project has always been, because there was previously a subdivision plan approved, has always been essentially the on-site sanitary waste system issue vis-a-vis the potable wells. So this isn't a new situation for the developer. It's pretty well known. So it is kind of surprising that they apparently, again, based on my conversations with the health department, haven't sought to address this nitrogen loading issue. It's been out there. The issue's been out there. I've heard some of the other comments, but going to the standards that the board has to apply, one of the concerns that I'm not hearing from the applicant is whether or not the applicant's taking the position that with respect to the nitrogen loading issue, it is in full compliance with state regulation and or any applicable federal regulation, because it's my understanding that they have to be able to make a showing that that's the case. Again, the applicant can speak to that. One of the other issues I was kind of concerned about is, when you have, essentially what's happening here is when I'm looking at Autumn Circle subdivision was permitted and analyzed on a certain traffic flow. And this now upsets that whole, and I apologize, I haven't been to all the hearings, and I've been trying to follow this. So I don't know if the board has had the benefit of the planning department providing to the board the analysis that was undertaken at the time that the Autumn Circle subdivision was approved, to see what standards and what concerns were addressed then, which resulted in the design of that road. Because clearly, if that road was designed on X and now it's X plus, that should be a legitimate concern for this board. So, and again, I apologize. I know I don't live in your neighborhood, but I just wanted to speak out on the issue.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
On the new drawings, are there any plans where the developer would have to come back and do service? I remember last year where the culvert between myself and Brad, it's always filled up with leaves, and the town has never been there in 30 years. And I thought they said, well, we'll maintain that to make sure the new drainage falls through. And then when they had the septic, which was going to be above grade, were they going to service that also? Is that part of their response? Who would be servicing their above-grade septic? Would that be the developer or the owners in the development?
That, in fact, would be one of the conditions that we would address in any permit.
I was just trying to remember
Right.
that.
No, exactly.
Don't show up with the check on time. How are you going to show up to clean out the system?
Yeah, right. No, if you're going to build something, you got to maintain it. Yeah. Okay. Anything else before I?
I'm sorry every once in a while my planning board
Yeah. Okay.
messages just kick in. I'm just trying to, and Mr. McKenzie had to leave, but I don't see a detail on the cul-de-sac, and so I can't figure out the width of it. And just, they were speaking to pulling out of their driveways, those aren't shown, and I'm guessing that given the width, it's going to eliminate all on-street parking for these people as well, as far as guests or anything else. So anyway, sorry, I don't usually
Right.
go there, but
There's a lot of detail that needs to be
Yeah.
fleshed out. You're exactly right. Okay. Did you have anything, Mr. Baker, anything else you wanted to add at this point? No. So we have a new date, which is, just refresh me.
April 9th, Monday.
April 9th, and prior to that date, we're going to be having the peer review work done.
We will have peer review done in advance of April 9th.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt, one more time. Is there, and I asked that earlier, is there a definitive date where you give them A, B, C, D to respond to?
Yes.
And rather than just saying, see you next time, is there a deadline where we know where our real estate stands? Some of the people are going to sell their houses worried that you're going to lose half your value, which is understandable. Is there a date?
Well, ultimately, there's...
Went over the new dates.
Yeah, we went over the dates. There will be, there's a date for decision. In advance of that, we will need certain items resolved. And if, in fact, they have not provided us with the information, we can impose conditions based on reasonable assumptions. And if they don't have anything in the record that shows otherwise, that they're going to be stuck with that. So we are working that into the ultimate schedule. Yes, sir.
Chris Casey, live at 8 Autumn Circle. I remember this project when it was 6 houses. That wasn't, then it went down to 3 houses, then it went dormant. So this thing's been around for like 20 years, not just like 3 years.
Right.
I'm just curious, is that right-of-way real that leads into Autumn Circle? Because if not, this has been an immense waste of time. Is that a real right-of-way? Has that been proven either way, or do we have to go through this whole process and then it ends up in court somewhere?
My understanding, the board was informed by an attorney that represents some of the homeowners in the neighborhood that there is a lawsuit that's been filed with respect to that question. So a court's going to decide that.
Okay, so they have to have a lawsuit,
right,
to answer a question that technically should be answerable, right?
It should be, but ultimately they are proceeding at their risk, because if they have a project permitted based on certain assumptions that prove not to be true, then they can't proceed.
Okay, so if that fails at Autumn Circle, if they don't have that throughway to turn my neighborhood into a, the best bypass in Hingham, if they don't have that, then this whole thing just dies, right? And we've wasted probably hundreds of hours of a project, when they could just put 6 houses and be done with it.
Yep.
All right, I'm just trying to wait, because I've been showing up here for a long time.
We've been showing up.
You've been here for a long time,
right,
too.
But as you know, we have to follow the state laws that deal with affordable housing projects, and we are doing our best under these circumstances.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I'll accept the motion to...
I just want to echo some
Sure.
of the frustration that an abutter just expressed. And I guess it's not clear to me whether the applicant will be providing additional materials that the board has requested in the past and that they've committed to provide in advance of the next hearing date. And primarily, the waiver list, I believe it's in your best interest to provide a complete and specific waiver list, because the board has been very clear that it will not grant blanket waivers. Do you have...
So, I think the answer to that is, to the extent that we have received less information than we need, the board is obligated to continue, and we continue based on the information that's in the record. And so if they have not given us a waiver request for a specific regulation, we will not grant that waiver. And then that's it. It's not going to be, it's granted up to the amount that's allowed. Unless we have a specific waiver request, it simply is not going to be granted. So I share the frustration, but I also know that we have to proceed in accordance with some state rules and guidelines. And it's a fine line that we're walking.
So, to me, though, we talked about denying it on the legal grounds because of paperwork, but to me, it just doesn't seem like the applicant's been changing the plan, really. He's made some provisions with some safety concerns with traffic, but 15 feet from a wetland line, 5 feet from Ward Street. I personally can't live with that. So it's 35 feet for front setback, 20 for side setback. I think, I don't know when we're going to go over conditions and stuff, but.
Well, we had a time schedule.
And there's legal ramifications of just saying, we deny this application. Because they won't just, refile it. I think you mentioned that. They're going to, no, they won't do that. They'll you explained it earlier. what will happen, they'll appeal it, and then the state will look into it, so we don't want to do that. But, you know, I don't know, it's just like, it's been a long time, and there really hasn't been many changes. And now the health department, you know, issued a letter, and they took it upon themselves to look into nitrogen loading and all that. And I think Dr. Kurt mentioned it even the first time he was here, whatever, 6 months ago. He mentioned some bedroom sizes, and we haven't seen any changes. We saw a change from 2 units, but then they increased the bedrooms to 90. And anyway.
Well, I mean, our job is to make sure that we come up with a reasoned resolution that can withstand review by the state boards.
Right.
And we're going to make sure that we have a record in place so that this town is protected.
Right.
And that's our
This
goal.
neighborhood.
Okay. So I appreciate everyone bearing with us. We're going to continue the process, and we're going to make sure that we get the information we need from the applicant, and to the extent it is not forthcoming, we will make we'll take the steps to make sure that the conditions are in place that protect the town.
Joe, do you,
Yes.
does the board need Emily to put in writing again to the applicant all of the items that have been requested or promised and that still aren't there? Do you want to just go with the list she gave on the record earlier today? How do you prefer that get handled?
I don't want to overburden you, Emily, but I think it would be helpful if we continue to have that paper, those letters going out, so that we have a clear record as to what's needed. You need a motion on that, just,
No,
Right.
no,
No,
I just,
right.
just direction.
yes, right, good. So, anything new before, yes, sir?
I apologize if this question's already been answered. Ian Ford at 29 Stanford Drive again. The proposed areas where the septics are going to be, has that area been percolated already to determine whether or not the septic can work there, or what the situation is?
I'll let the applicant answer that.
The design of the septic and the soil borings and conditions indicate that, yes, we believe we can comply with the regulations for that.
But has there been a percolation test on each site where the septic is going to be, so we actually know? Because personally, when I built my house,
Right.
I had a septic where we designed it on paper, but guess what? We hit granite.
Right.
So then we had to push it out.
Right. That's an
So,
experience that many have,
in
yeah.
my eyes, we're doing things a little bit backwards, because we should do a perk test first to determine if a septic can go there. And if we hit granite, then we better go find another place for it to fit. So, because if we pour foundations where houses are going to go, and we need to actually put a septic there, that's a challenge in my eyes. So, and what happens if that does occur, if the percolation tests have not been
Well,
completed?
there will be a condition requiring that work be done, and in fact, if they do perk tests and it fails, they can't proceed.
Okay, so at least, all right, so at least in my eyes, and it's limited, but I don't want a foundation put someplace where that's the only place a septic system would work, and now we're really between a rock and a hard place.
We will not be between a rock and a hard place. The applicant will be in that situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jean Silverio, 6 Autumn Circle. I've lived here for 44 years, and I've watched my daughter and my granddaughter play safely on the street. And I watch a new generation of wonderful children do the same thing. I was a teacher in Boston for 36 years. My children listened to my words. I'm finding it's going on deaf ears, what we've been saying. And I also want to remind them that in 2002, that was perked, they wanted 6 houses, it was perked for 3. What's changed?
Exactly.
I just had a question regarding the waiver list. When would that be addressed that we could make comment?
What's our schedule on that? Because we originally had a schedule based upon the work being done by today.
So we could begin to address that at the next meeting. The Board of Health has made comments on the previously requested waivers, which the applicant has not responded to. So, unless the plan revisions affect your earlier comments, the board can probably act.
We're just a schedule because we have our Board of Health meetings and I'm on sewer commission
Right,
and the water
right.
supply, so, when are the dates?
Do you want to do?
So I think we should try for the next meeting.
Yeah.
I agree. So that would be April 8th. 9th or 8th?
9th. The 9th,
I'm sorry.
I started the confusion. It's
Monday.
Monday and the 9th.
2 weeks from tonight. 2 weeks from this evening.
Yes, yes, sir, and then we are going to end the public comments.
Baruch Youssef, 48 Ward Street.
Yes.
I heard you talking about the waiver list and so on. What about the setbacks here in the property right here? Seems like the houses is just like few feet from the property line. Is that acceptable? When they start digging foundations, they will be digging in our yard. So I'd like to know what the setback going to be at the minimum in this waiver list.
So they, without anyone's consent, they cannot go into someone else's yard to do work.
Well,
so it would be unfortunate if they had a project that required them to do work that they could not do.
Correct. But the setback, I need to know the distance because there is fire rating protection from the property line by code.
Right.
It has to be adhered to.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is a setback an easement?
No.
No.
No. Okay, now this really is the last comment.
Dennis Lynch, 10 Autumn Circle. Am I right in saying they're proposing to put an island in our cul-de-sac?
Yeah.
That's a public street. What gives them the right to do that?
That's a really
Are
good
they
question.
relocating somebody's driveway? Has been paying taxes on that property for how many years? What gives them that right to do that? You've got some audacity. It's incredible.
So, I appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. But we want to make sure that there's a level of decor here, so thank you. I will now take a motion to continue this hearing to April 9th at
Can we do 7:30, please?
At 7:30.
7:30.
Yes.
I will make that motion. So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are continued to
Thank
April
you.
9th at 7:30.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other items on our agenda? No. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.